We now introduce the class block, which organizes multiple entries into a sequence. And we start out by defining what the create, read, and update methods for the block should be. Basically, they should append entries to the block, allow us to look up entries that are already in the block, and then of course update entries that we have in the block. So as an example, assume we introduce two new entries, E1 and E2, both written by Bilbo as the author, and we create a new block. We would like to be able to append the entries E1 and E2 to the block. And for the append operation, we would like to use the chevron symbols or chevron operator that we already saw when we introduced arrays. Similarly, we want to be able to use puts on the block where we index into the block. So this should return the second entry of the block. And we want to assign to a given indexed entry a new entry we can create on the fly. So this would be update operation. And our observation is here that we can use an array to store the entries in the block class and then use these operators such as the chevron or the indexed lookup as well as the update operator, because these operators in Ruby are literally methods. So we can define the class block such that we override the methods for append, lookup, and update using the operators, the chevron operator, the indexed lookup, and the update operator here. We saw them already for arrays, as I mentioned before, and since we are defining the class block as a shallow interface to the data structure we use to implement the entries, and this is an array, it would be convenient for us to basically reuse the same set of operators. And I'll show you how to do this next. So we define the class block and initialize with an arbitrary length parameter list, which is automatically converted into an array of entries, and we can assign to the instance variable at entries the array we are handed into the initialize method. The push operator, or chevron operator as I've called it before, takes an entry and then adds it to the block. And because entries is an array, we can reuse the arrays push operator to simply add the given entry to the entries array. And similarly, we can reuse the lookup and update from arrays type. And so the lookup operator expects to see an index, an integer, and we supply this simply to the array and you reuse the array lookup. Similarly, the array update we reuse to implement the block update. It expects an index and an entry, and then we reuse the array update where at the index we insert the entry. Back in the IRB, you can see that I've now defined the class block. With its initialize method, I could give a variable length argument list of entries that I want to add to the block initially, and it would be handed to us as an array of entries. And you can see that I've defined the methods for the push operator, the lookup operator, and the update operator correspondingly. So let's try this out. Let's create a new block. If I don't give any parameters to the method new, we will get the empty array here, which will then initialize add entries properly. So you can see here we have a block which has currently an empty array to indicate its entries. Now let's explore the use of the push operator. So onto the block B, we want to push entries E1 and E2. And in fact, now we get back from Ruby the array that exists under the hood within the block, and we can indeed identify two separate entries. The first one is E1 and the second one is E2. We can also look up these entries if we index into the block. So if I want to see the second entry, I'm using B of 1, and in fact I'm getting back this entry. Notice how we benefit now from our toS method within the entry class, because we actually get them printed out in legible form. And B of 0, of course, is the first entry we have placed into the block. We can also create a new one by saying B of 2 equals entry.new of Bilbo and in fact we see the new entry has been created. We can then ask ourselves what is B of 2, and we get back the entry we have stored just there.